What would you sacrifice for love? He walked away from a billion-dollar legacy. She gave her heart to a man with secrets, and together they built a dream by the sea. But just when everything seemed perfect, a voice from the past came knocking. And this time, love may not be enough to keep the future from falling apart. In today's chapter, the past never stays quiet. Will Jessica and Jason's love survive the shadows that still linger, or will one phone call undo everything they've built together? Stay to the end, because what happens next will change everything. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make, all because of that girl? Jason took a slow, measured breath, willing himself to stay calm. This isn't about her, he said, his voice steady but firm. It's about me. His father scoffed, shaking his head. You're about to throw away everything we've built. Jason held his ground. It's not something I built. It's something that was forced on me. For the first time, his father didn't immediately have a response. The silence between them stretched, heavy and tense. Then, with a weary sigh, the older man leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Do you even know what you're doing? Jason didn't hesitate. For the first time in my life, yes. Across the city, Jessica tried to pretend she wasn't thinking about him. She focused on work, on routines, on anything that could keep her mind occupied. But no matter how much she tried, his absence clung to her like a shadow. And then, the headlines shattered what little distance she had created. Jason Stone resigns from the Rockwell Hotels, chooses a new path. Jessica read the article once, then twice, then a third time, as if the words might change. Had he really done it? Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Had he done it for her? A storm of emotions churned inside her. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of hope she wasn't sure she was ready to feel. Her fingers hovered over her phone, hesitating for only a second before she typed the message, Jessica, we need to talk. Her pulse jumped when the reply came almost instantly. Jason, tell me where and when. Jessica swallowed, her thoughts racing. Did this change anything? Could it? Finally, she typed back. Jessica, meet me at the cafe near the park. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived. She took a seat by the window, folding her hands in her lap, trying to steady the nervous energy buzzing through her. The soft hum of coffee machines and quiet conversations faded into the background. All she could focus on was the fact that in just a few moments she would see Jason again. And for the first time in days, she wasn't sure what she would say. Minutes later, Jason stepped inside. Jessica's breath caught as she took him in. He looked different. There was a weight missing from his shoulders, yet his expression was more serious, more resolute. He spotted her instantly, his eyes locking onto hers before he made his way over, slow and deliberate. Sitting across from her, he didn't speak right away. Neither did she. For a few moments, the only sound between them was the quiet hum of the cafe. Then Jessica finally broke the silence. You really left the company? Jason nodded once. Yes. She studied his face, searching for hesitation, for doubt. There was none. Why? She asked, her voice softer now. He held her gaze. Because it wasn't what I wanted. Jessica swallowed hard. And what do you want? Jason exhaled, as if the weight of that question had been pressing on him for a long time. I want to build something on my own, something that actually matters to me. Jessica didn't look away. She searched his expression for any trace of dishonesty, any hesitation, but all she saw was truth. Her fingers curled slightly on the tabletop. And what about me? She asked, barely above a whisper. Jason leaned in, his voice low but certain. You've always meant something to me, Jessica. A shiver ran through her at the sincerity in his tone. She had spent so many days questioning, doubting, wondering if she had been foolish to believe in him, and now she wanted to believe again. Jessica took a slow breath, then let out a quiet sigh. I didn't know if I could trust you, Jason. And now, she hesitated before finally meeting his eyes. Now, I want to try. The corner of Jason's lips lifted into a slow, relieved smile. I promise I won't let you down. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Jessica thought, maybe, just maybe, she could trust that promise. Jessica nodded, and in that moment, she knew. Something had truly changed. They were no longer just two strangers who had met on a bus. They were starting something new, something real. The days after their meeting at the café felt strangely calm, like the quiet after a storm. Jessica and Jason kept in touch, but carefully, as if testing the waters of something unfamiliar. Conversations were softer, lighter, yet tinged with an unspoken awareness that things were different now. She wanted to believe he had changed. And honestly, everything pointed to that. Jason seemed lighter, more genuine, as if shedding the weight of his past had allowed him to breathe for the first time. But there was still something inside her that kept her from fully embracing this new reality. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was just difficult to believe that a man like him could truly choose a different path. One afternoon, as Jessica wiped down a table at the diner, movement outside caught her eye. A sleek black car pulled up across the street. Her heart stuttered. She recognized Jason before he even stepped out. He moved with the same quiet confidence, but there was something different, something more grounded. As he entered the diner, he walked to the counter, sliding into his usual seat just like he used to. Jessica smirked as she grabbed the coffee pot. "I thought you had forgotten the way here," she teased, pouring him a cup. Jason met her eyes with a slow, easy smile. "Hard to forget when this is the best coffee in town." Jessica rolled her eyes, but couldn't fight the warmth spreading through her chest. She leaned on the counter, watching him. "So, what have you been up to?" Jason tapped his spoon against the rim of the cup, considering his answer. Finally, he looked at her. "I'm working on a new project." Jessica raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Something about the way he said it, steady, determined, made her curious. For the first time, she wondered, had Jason truly found the life he was searching for? And more importantly, was she ready to be part of it? "A new project?" Jessica asked, tilting her head slightly. Jason nodded, his expression serious yet filled with an underlying excitement. "Yes. I want to open a hotel, something completely different from what I've known my whole life, something smaller, more personal, more welcoming." Jessica frowned, setting the coffee pot down. "You've spent your entire life surrounded by luxury hotels, and now you want to build something modest?" Jason let out a soft chuckle. "Not just modest, meaningful." He stirred his coffee absently, his gaze distant for a moment. "I want to create a place where people feel at home, not just like guests passing through." She studied him, searching his face for any hint of doubt, but there was none. He was serious. "And where exactly do you plan to open this hotel?" she asked, leaning on the counter. Jason hesitated just a second before answering. "In the coastal town my parents used to take me to when I was a kid." Jessica blinked, surprised. "You've never mentioned that place before." A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Because I never really thought about it. Until now." Something inside her warmed at his words. This wasn't just an idea. This was him trying to create something new, something that wasn't built on his family's legacy but on his own dreams. "And how do you plan to start?" she asked, her voice softer now. Jason's gaze locked onto hers. There was something steady, something certain in his expression. "I was wondering if you'd want to be part of it." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason leaned in slightly, his hands resting on the counter between them. "You've always wanted to open your own bakery, right?" She nodded slowly, a mixture of excitement and hesitation swirling in her chest. "I do? Then why not do it inside my hotel?" A wave of surprise coursed through Jessica, making her grip tighten around her coffee cup. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Completely." Jason's gaze was steady, unwavering. She blinked, trying to process the weight of his words. A bakery inside his hotel? The idea had never even crossed her mind. "I've never thought about that," she admitted. "Well, think about it now," he said, leaning in slightly. "I want this to be something we build together." Her stomach twisted with emotions she couldn't quite name. Excitement, uncertainty, hope, and fear all tangled into one. That night, Jessica barely slept. Jason's offer echoed in her mind, refusing to let her rest. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, a real chance to have her own business, a place where her passion could thrive. But with that dream came risks. What if it didn't work? What if she put everything into this, only for it to fall apart? What if this brought them closer, just to tear them apart again? Yet, deep inside, a quiet voice whispered something different. What if it worked? What if this was the chance she had been waiting for? The next day, she found herself walking toward the same cafe where she and Jason had last talked. She spotted him through the window, already sitting there, fingers drumming lightly against the table. The moment she stepped inside, he looked up, his expression filled with anticipation. She took a seat across from him, her heartbeat quickening. "Have you thought about my offer?" Jason asked, studying her carefully. Jessica inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yes, and—" She bit her lip, letting the suspense linger for a second longer before a slow smile spread across her lips. "I accept." Jason's entire face lit up, a rare, unguarded joy flashing in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice laced with both excitement and disbelief. She nodded, this time without hesitation. "I'm sure." And just like that, everything changed. "I am," Jessica said, her voice steady. "But I want to do this my way." Jason smiled, his gaze warm and knowing. "It's always been your way, Jessica." She let out a soft laugh, a lightness settling in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. Then, "I guess we have a plan." "Yes, we do." And in that moment, she knew. This was more than just a business venture. It was a leap into the unknown, a step towards something that had the power to change everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jessica and Jason threw themselves into planning, mapping out every detail of the hotel and the bakery that would soon take shape within it. Their chosen location, a small, picturesque coastal town, felt like the perfect place for a fresh start. Nestled between rolling hills and the endless stretch of the sea, it carried a quiet magic, a sense of possibility that neither of them had ever experienced before. For Jessica, the idea of leaving the city she had known all her life was daunting. The towering buildings, the familiar streets, the comforting routine of the diner, it was all she had ever known. Walking away from it felt like stepping off a ledge, with no safety net. But somehow, the fear was intertwined with excitement. Jason, on the other hand, had never looked more at ease. Away from the weight of his family's expectations, he carried himself differently. Lighter, freer. There was a spark in his eyes, a passion that had never been there before. "This is going to work," he said one evening as they sat on the beach, the sound of the waves filling the space between them. Blueprints and sketches were scattered between them on the sand, illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. Jessica pulled her knees to her chest, watching the ocean shift in endless motion. She smiled, though uncertainty still lingered at the edges of her mind. "You sound very confident," she said. "Because I am," Jason replied without hesitation, "and you should be too." She let out a slow sigh, tracing patterns in the sand with her fingertips. "It's just, this all feels too good to be true." Jason turned to her, his expression gentle yet firm. "Maybe it's just finally time for something good to happen." Jessica met his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Jason turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Why?" Jessica hesitated, staring at the rolling waves before finally answering. "Because I never thought I'd get an opportunity like this." Without a second thought, Jason reached for her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "You deserve this opportunity, Jessica. You've worked hard for it." She met his gaze, searching for any hint of uncertainty, but all she found was sincerity, unwavering and real. "I just want it to work out," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason squeezed her hand gently. "It will. And even if things aren't perfect right away, we'll figure it out together." Something in his voice, calm, certain, eased the tension in her chest. Jessica nodded slowly, allowing herself to believe, if only for a moment, that maybe he was right. Maybe for the first time in her life, she didn't have to do this alone. The next morning, they drove to the site where their dream would take shape. The salty breeze from the ocean carried a crisp freshness, and the golden sunlight bathed the land in warmth. Before them stood the remains of an old mansion, its once grand structure now worn by time. Ivy curled around its edges and the paint had faded, but its bones were still strong, still standing. Jessica took a slow step forward, gazing at the building with a mix of curiosity and awe. "This place has history," she murmured, running her fingers over the weathered wooden railing. Jason nodded, his gaze fixed on the structure as if he could already see what it was meant to become. "Yeah, that's why I want to restore it instead of tearing it down. It deserves a second chance." A small smile played on Jessica's lips. "That makes a lot of sense." Jason turned to her then, a different kind of excitement flickering in his eyes. "Have you thought about a name for the bakery?" Jessica hesitated, considering the weight of his question. Then, as if the answer had been waiting for her all along, a smile spread across her face. "Il Dolce Vita." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Sweet life? Exactly," she said, the words feeling right in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Because that's what I want, not just for the bakery but for everything." Jason smiled, something warm and knowing in his expression. "Then that's it," he said. "Your dream has a name now." Jessica exhaled, her heart racing with a mix of exhilaration and fear. For the first time, it all felt real, and for the first time she wasn't afraid to chase it. For the first time, it felt real. Each day, piece by piece, the project took shape. Jessica found herself caught in a whirlwind, splitting her time between long hours at the cafe and endless meetings with Jason and the architects overseeing the hotel's restoration. The exhaustion settled deep in her bones, but beneath it there was something else, something stronger, a sense of purpose, a feeling that, for once, she was building something that truly mattered. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, she realized she was falling in love. Not just with the idea of Jason, but with the man he was becoming. The man who was stepping out of his family's shadow to create something real. The man who was choosing his own path, not out of rebellion, but out of a genuine desire to be better. One cold evening, as they walked along the beach, the rhythmic crash of waves filling the silence between them, Jason suddenly stopped. Jessica turned to him, brows furrowed. "What is it?" He hesitated, his fingers tightening slightly around hers before he spoke. "You know that this," he gestured between them, "isn't just about the hotel, right?" Jessica's heart stumbled in her chest. She swallowed. "What do you mean?" Jason took a deep breath, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I mean that this has always been about you." The words hit her like a wave, knocking the air from her lungs. "Jason, I know I'm terrible with words," he said with a quiet, nervous chuckle, "but you need to know that you changed everything for me." Jessica blinked, the weight of his confession settling deep inside her. He wasn't just saying this to make her stay, he meant it. And maybe, just maybe, she had known it all along. She took a slow, shaky breath. "I feel the same way," she whispered. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, and then, finally, he smiled. "Then promise me something." Jessica looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. "What?" Jason squeezed her hand gently, his warmth grounding her. "That you won't run away when things get hard." A lump formed in her throat. She had spent so much of her life running, from disappointment, from uncertainty, from anything that felt too risky. But here, standing beside him, she didn't want to run anymore. "I promise," she whispered. And in that moment she knew, deep in her heart, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Days turned into weeks, and the construction of the hotel and bakery pushed forward at a relentless pace. Jessica had never felt so deeply involved in something before. Watching her dream slowly take shape was almost surreal. She spent hours with the architects, carefully selecting the smallest details, the color of the walls, the layout of the kitchen, even the type of wood for the tables. Every choice felt like a piece of herself being woven into the space. Jason, meanwhile, was just as consumed by the hotel's transformation. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just following orders, he was making the decisions. He oversaw every aspect of the renovations, ensuring that nothing was done without thought, without purpose. He had never felt more in control of his own future. But, as with everything in life, challenges were inevitable. One morning, Jessica sat in the small temporary office they were using, sifting through invoices and permits when Jason walked in. His expression was tense. "We have a problem," he said, skipping any preamble. Jessica immediately set the papers down. "What happened?" she asked, concern tightening her chest. Jason exhaled sharply, holding up a folder. "The construction company just sent their latest report," he said. "The cost of the renovations is going to be twice what we originally planned." Jessica's eyes widened. "What? How is that possible?" Wordlessly, Jason handed her the report. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through the pages. Her stomach sank. They had prepared for setbacks, but this was something else entirely. "The building's structure is older than we thought," Jason said, his voice heavy with frustration. "They need to reinforce the foundation, and that's going to take more time, and a lot more money." Jessica's grip tightened around the report as she scanned the figures. The numbers blurred for a moment, her mind struggling to process them. "But we already had a set budget," she said, her stomach twisting. "Yeah, well, unexpected things happen." Jason ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Jessica took a deep breath, steadying herself. "So, what do we do?" Jason leaned against the table, his expression unreadable. "I have some money saved up and we could cover the extra cost, but that means delaying the opening." She met his gaze, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "What if we make some cuts?" Jason immediately shook his head. "I don't want to cut anything. We built this plan together. Every detail matters. It needs to be exactly how we imagined it." Jessica pressed her lips together, weighing their options. She hated the idea of pushing back the opening, but she hated the thought of rushing something even more. "Then we delay it," she said firmly. Jason's eyes lifted to hers. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she nodded. "I'd rather wait a few more months and do it the right way, than rush and compromise everything." A slow smile curved Jason's lips, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. "That's one of the things I admire most about you." Jessica arched an eyebrow. "What?" "Your patience," he said simply. "Your determination to do things the right way, no matter how long it takes." Jessica smiled softly, warmth blooming in her chest. "I guess I'm finally learning to trust the process." Jason reached for her hand, his grip firm yet reassuring. "We're in this together," he said, his voice steady. Jessica looked up at him, and in that moment every lingering doubt faded away. No matter the obstacles ahead, she knew they were building something worth waiting for, but the delay in the opening came with its own set of challenges. Whispers spread through town, doubts creeping in like shadows. Some people wondered if the hotel would ever be completed. Others speculated that Jason had taken on more than he could handle, that the dream was crumbling before it even had a chance to stand. Jessica and Jason ignored the noise. Every day they visited the site, overseeing the renovation, making sure that each beam, each brick, each detail was exactly as they had envisioned. Little by little, the hotel began to take shape, and with it, so did Jessica's bakery. In between the chaos of construction and planning, Jessica spent hours in the kitchen, perfecting her recipes. Flour dusted her apron, the scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air, and the rhythm of kneading dough became a source of comfort. One afternoon, Jason walked in just as she pulled a freshly baked cake from the oven. She cut a slice and handed it to him, watching as he took his first bite. The moment he tasted it, his eyes lit up. "This is amazing," he said, his voice full of appreciation. Jessica smirked, wiping her hands on a towel. "You say that about everything I make." "That's because everything you make really is amazing." She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "You're a good customer. And I'll be the best customer at your cafe," he promised, leaning against the counter. Jessica met his gaze, warmth spreading through her chest. His famous corned beef chain. "You know," she said softly, "I never imagined my life would take this direction." "Me neither." He reached for her hand across the table, his thumb brushing gently over her skin. "But I'm glad it did." Her heart swelled as she looked into his eyes, seeing not just a man who had changed, but a man who had chosen this path, chosen her. "So am I," she whispered, and in that moment, as laughter and the scent of warm cake filled the air, she knew. Every struggle, every delay, every challenge had been worth it. But life always finds a way to test people. The bakery was almost ready. Jessica had spent the afternoon arranging the final touches, positioning tables, adjusting chairs, making sure every detail felt warm and inviting. The scent of fresh wood and vanilla lingered in the air, a promise of the dream that was finally coming to life. Then Jason's phone rang. She glanced up, noticing the way his entire posture tensed as he stared at the screen. his jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the device as if bracing for impact. "What is it?" she asked, setting down a stack of napkins. Jason hesitated before exhaling slowly. "My father." Jessica's stomach tightened. "What does he want?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slipped the phone back into his pocket, his expression unreadable. "He says he needs to talk to me, that it's urgent." Her heart sank. Jason's father had never been the kind of man to reach out unless he wanted something, and whatever this was, it didn't feel good. "And are you going?" she asked carefully. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite read. "I need to know what he wants." Jessica nodded, but worry gnawed at her. "All right," she said softly, "just be careful." Jason stepped closer, gently cupping her face in his hands. His touch was warm, steady, reassuring, even as uncertainty loomed between them. "I'm not going back," he said firmly, his voice low but certain. Jessica closed her eyes, letting herself believe him. "I hope not," she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, lingering for just a moment before pulling away and walking out the door. Jessica watched him go, an uneasy feeling curling in her chest. Something about this felt like trouble. Hours later, the sun had set by the time Jason returned. The warm glow of the bakery's lights cast shadows across his face, making his tense expression even more pronounced. Jessica's heart quickened. "What happened?" she asked, setting her clipboard aside. Jason exhaled heavily and sank into the chair beside her. He ran a hand through his hair, looking like a man carrying the weight of something much bigger than himself. "My father wants me to go back to the company." Jessica felt the floor beneath her shift, an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. She had known this day might come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. "What?" Jason sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, tension evident in every line of his body. "He said I'm making a mistake investing in this hotel, that it's reckless to throw everything away for something so small, when I could be running something much bigger." Jessica felt a flare of frustration. She had never met Jason's father, but she knew enough to understand the weight his words carried. She reached for Jason's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "And what did you say?" He closed his eyes for a moment, as if grounding himself, before meeting her gaze. "That I'm not going back." Jessica let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Relief flooded her, but doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. "Are you sure?" Jason's lips quirked up in the smallest of smiles, his grip on her hand tightening. "Absolutely." Her heart swelled. "Then, that's it." He nodded, the certainty in his eyes unwavering. "I chose this path, Jessica. I chose you." The sincerity in his voice sent warmth rushing through her, and suddenly she felt tears welling in her eyes. "I believe in you," she whispered. Jason pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close, as if silently promising that nothing, no doubt, no obstacle, no voice from the past, would change what they had built. A dream taking shape. Days passed, each one bringing them closer to the finish line. The final touches were being added. The hotel stood proud, its restored facade blending history with a new beginning. The bakery smelled of fresh bread and coffee, the warmth of it seeping into the very foundation of the dream they had worked so hard for. Jessica stood in front of the newly renovated building, her chest swelling with emotion. They had done it. The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden light over the coastal town, making the sea glisten like scattered diamonds. A gentle breeze danced through the streets, carrying the comforting aroma of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries straight from the bakery's kitchen. Jessica inhaled deeply, letting the moment sink in. This was more than a business, more than a fresh start. This was home, and she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The final touches. After months of relentless effort, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt, the hotel and bakery were finally ready. Jessica stood at the main entrance, taking in every detail she had carefully designed. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a golden glow over the cafe's interior. The chairs and tables were arranged to create an inviting, intimate atmosphere. The scent of freshly baked pastries lingered in the air, mixing with the rich aroma of coffee, wrapping the space in warmth. Across the street, Jason was engaged in conversation with the newly hired hotel staff. There was a lightness in his expression, a sense of fulfillment that hadn't been there before. He looked whole. When he finally walked over to her, Jessica couldn't help but smile. "Looks like we did it," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief and pride as she took in everything around her. Jason took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We didn't just do it, we created something incredible." Jessica exhaled, but the nervous energy bubbling inside her didn't fade. "I'm nervous." Jason studied her carefully. "Why?" She let out a deep sigh, glancing at the bakery's pristine counter, the empty tables, the untouched coffee cups. "What if it doesn't work? What if no one shows up?" Jason chuckled softly, his grip on her hand tightening. "Trust me, it's going to be a success." She looked into his eyes, filled with unwavering certainty, and tried to absorb his confidence. She wanted to believe it. The grand opening. At exactly noon, the bakery doors swung open. At first there was only silence, the quiet anticipation of something new. Then, slowly, the first customers began to arrive, their curiosity pulling them inside. Jessica barely had time to breathe. She darted between the kitchen and the front counter, preparing orders as servers whisked plates of pastries and steaming cups of coffee to eager guests. Then it happened. The first reaction. "This cake is divine," a woman exclaimed after taking a bite of the lemon pie, her eyes lighting up in delight. "I've never had coffee this well made before," another customer murmured, savoring each sip. Jessica paused for a brief second, letting the words sink in. Compliments. Genuine, heartfelt compliments. Warmth spread through her chest. Every sleepless night, every moment of self-doubt, it had all led to this. Her dream wasn't just alive. It was real, a night to remember. Jason moved effortlessly through the hotel, greeting guests, checking on the staff, and ensuring every detail of the grand opening flowed seamlessly. His presence was magnetic, calm, assured, and undeniably proud of what they had built. As he passed by the bakery, he spotted Jessica behind the counter, wiping down a tray with a satisfied yet exhausted expression. He leaned against the doorway, a knowing smirk tugging at his lips. "I told you it would be a success." Jessica turned, laughing as she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe you were right." Jason raised an eyebrow playfully. "Maybe?" She rolled her eyes, but the smile lingering on her lips betrayed her amusement. "Fine, you were right." He winked. "I'm always right." Jessica shook her head, but deep down, she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Under the moonlight, hours later, as the last customers drifted away and the lights inside the bakery dimmed, Jessica and Jason found themselves outside, sitting at one of the small terrace tables. The ocean stretched before them, dark and endless, reflecting the silver glow of the moon. A salty breeze carried the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Jason exhaled, crossing his arms as he leaned back. It was a good start. Jessica tilted her head back, breathing in the night air. It was amazing. Her voice was filled with something beyond satisfaction. Wonder, disbelief, and a touch of relief. "I can't believe this really happened." Jason turned to her, his gaze steady. "Believe it. You worked hard for this." She met his eyes, the weight of the past months slowly unraveling from her shoulders. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly feel it. The joy. The success. The fulfillment. And then, as she watched Jason in the soft glow of the lanterns, she spoke the words she had been holding back. "I never really thanked you." He lifted a brow. "Thank me? For what?" She hesitated, then placed her hand on the table, just inches from his, "For believing in me." Jason didn't hesitate. He reached out, covering her hand with his touch warm and grounding. "I always believed in you." Jessica felt something deep and unshakable settle in her heart. A warmth that had nothing to do with the bakery or the success of the day, but everything to do with the man sitting beside her. She let out a breath, smiling softly. "I don't think I've ever been this happy." Jason held her gaze, his expression unreadable at first, but then, there it was, a slow, genuine smile that said everything. "Me neither." And under the moonlit sky, with the ocean whispering its approval, they sat there, two people who had built something together, not just in business, but in something far more profound, something real, exactly where she was meant to be. For the first time, Jessica felt a deep, undeniable certainty. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, she woke early, slipping out of bed with a sense of quiet anticipation. The bakery awaited, and she wanted everything to be perfect before the doors opened. Stepping inside, she inhaled the familiar scent of vanilla and fresh dough, the comforting aroma filling the space like a promise of new beginnings. She moved through the bakery, adjusting small details, the placement of the pastry trays, the angle of the chairs, wanting everything to reflect the care she had poured into this place. As she straightened a napkin holder, the front door creaked open. She turned, expecting to see an early delivery, only to find Jason standing there, a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Jessica blinked in surprise. "What's this?" Jason shrugged, his signature smirk playing at his lips. "Just a gift for the owner of the best bakery ever." A laugh bubbled from her lips as she took the bouquet, the soft fragrance of roses and lilies mingling with the scent of fresh bread. "You're unbelievable." Jason stepped closer, his eyes dancing with warmth. "I'm pretty sure I exist." Jessica shook her head, smiling, but when she met his gaze, the humor faded into something softer, something real. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice quieter now, as if afraid of the answer. Jason didn't hesitate. He closed the distance between them, gently cupping her face in his hands, his touch both steady and tender. "I've never been this happy." Her heart pounded, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Me neither." And then, with no more words left to say, Jason leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, slow and deliberate, as if sealing everything they had been through. Every late-night conversation, every quiet moment that had brought them to this exact place. And in that moment, Jessica knew. She wasn't just exactly where she was meant to be. She was with exactly who she was meant to be with. She knew that after all the challenges, doubts, and changes, this was only the beginning of something even bigger, something that, for the first time, didn't need labels or guarantees. Because with Jason, she had finally found what she had been searching for. The bakery and hotel were thriving, exceeding every expectation. In just a few days, they had become a new gathering place, drawing both locals and tourists with their warmth and charm. Jessica was busier than ever, but for the first time in her life, work didn't feel like a burden. It was a fulfillment, a quiet kind of joy in kneading dough, brewing coffee, and watching customers close their eyes in delight at the first bite of her pastries. Every compliment, every satisfied smile reminded her that she had built something real. Jason, on the other hand, had found his rhythm at the hotel. He oversaw every detail, inspecting rooms, talking to guests, ensuring that their experience was nothing short of perfect. What had once been just a vision had become reality. But happiness is never left untested. That afternoon, as Jessica rearranged the kitchen supplies, her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands on her apron and reached for it, frowning at the unfamiliar number. Something inside her whispered that she should let it go. Instead, she answered. "Hello?" For a moment there was silence. Then, a voice she hadn't heard in years sent a chill down her spine. "Jessica? It's been a long time." Her grip on the phone tightened. "What do you want, Nathan?" A low chuckle came from the other end. The same careless, self-assured tone she remembered too well. "I heard your bakery is doing well. Thought I'd check in." Jessica felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Of all people, Nathan was the last person she wanted to hear from. He was part of a past she had buried, one filled with broken promises, letdowns, and lessons she had learned the hard way. "I don't know how you got my number, but don't call me again." Her voice was steady, even as her hands shook. "Jessica, wait, I just wanted to talk," but she had already ended the call. She set her phone down and pressed her palms against the counter, forcing herself to take slow, measured breaths. It was nothing, just a voice from the past. It didn't mean anything. And yet, long after the call had ended, the unease remained. Later that evening, Jason walked into the bakery, his expression bright until he saw her. She was standing behind the counter, staring into space, her hands idly tracing the rim of a coffee cup. "Jess?" His voice was soft, concerned. She blinked and looked up. "Is everything okay?" Jessica hesitated. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to brush it off, pretend that nothing had happened. But something about the way Jason looked at her, the quiet patience, the steady presence, made her pause. Namely, for the first time, she didn't have to carry everything alone. "Nothing." Jason didn't look convinced. "Serious? Just an unwanted call?" Jessica forced a smile. "It's nothing you need to worry about." His frown deepened as he placed his hand over hers on the table, his warmth grounding her. "If someone upset you, I want to know." She sighed, realizing she couldn't hide it from him. "It was my ex." Jason's expression darkened. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "Does he want something?" "I don't know, and I don't want to find out." Jason nodded slowly, but Jessica noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly into a fist. "You trust me, right?" she asked. His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Of course I do." "Then there's nothing to worry about." He exhaled, forcing a small smile. "All right," but Jessica knew him too well. Jason wasn't the type to let things go so easily. The next day, while she was busy at the bakery, Jason's thoughts refused to settle. Something about the call nagged at him. He didn't like the idea of someone from Jessica's past resurfacing, especially if that person had the power to unsettle her. So he did what he did best. He dug for answers. It didn't take long to find out who Nathan was, and when Jason finally saw the full picture, his blood ran hot. Nathan wasn't just some ex-boyfriend. He was the man who had belittled Jessica's dreams, who had failed to support her when she needed it most, the kind of man who had made her second-guess herself, doubt her own worth. Jason clenched his jaw. He wasn't about to let someone like that worm his way back into her life. Not now, not ever. That evening, as the sky deepened into hues of violet and gold, Jason leaned against the bakery counter, watching Jessica move through the space she had built with her own hands. The scent of warm bread and freshly brewed coffee still lingered in the air, a comforting reminder of all they had accomplished. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere. As Jessica wiped down the last table, he finally spoke. "I want you to promise me something," he said, his voice steady but firm. She paused, looking up at him with mild surprise. "What is it?" Jason crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "That you won't let this man ruin what we've built." Jessica's brow furrowed. "Jason, he means nothing to me." "Then why have you been so distant since his call?" he asked, searching her expression. She hesitated, then turned away, running a hand through her hair. "Because he's a reminder of a past I don't want to revisit." Jason stepped closer, gently taking her hand in his. "Then let it go. You're not that person anymore. You have a future ahead of you, a future you've worked too hard to let be shadowed by the past." Jessica's eyes softened as she looked up at him. A breeze from the open window stirred the loose strands of her hair. "And does that future include you?" she asked, her voice quieter now. A small smile tugged at the corner of Jason's lip. "If you want it to." She took a slow, steady breath before entwining her fingers with his. "I do." And in that moment, as the last traces of daylight melted into the horizon, Jessica realized something profound. Her past no longer defined her. The pain, the doubts, the ghosts of what once was had no power over the life she was building now. What mattered was the present, the future, and the man standing right beside her. "A little," Jessica admitted, stretching her tired fingers, "but it's worth it." Jason watched her closely, noticing the quiet glow in her eyes, the unmistakable joy of someone who had poured her heart into something and seen it flourish. "I never doubted that," he said softly. She met his gaze, warmth spreading through her chest. "I never would have made it this far without you." Jason took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. His grip was steady, reassuring. "You would have," he said, "but I'm glad we did this together." The evening air was thick with the scent of salt and freshly baked bread, mingling with the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. The town had quieted, its streets now bathed in the golden glow of streetlights. "Jessica, have you ever thought about the future?" She tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." He hesitated for just a beat before smiling. "Do you see yourself with me in 10, 20, 50 years? Her heart stuttered, but there was no uncertainty, no doubt. The answer was already there, waiting. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, sure. Jason's smile deepened, a hint of something more in his expression. Then, without a word, he slowly released her hand and reached into his pocket. Time slowed. Jessica's breath caught as Jason sank down onto one knee before her, the sound of the waves fading into the background. Her heart pounded as she watched him pull out a small velvet box, his fingers steady despite the storm of emotion in his eyes. "Jessica," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "From the moment you paid for my bus ticket, my life changed. I never imagined that a woman like you would cross my path and turn everything I knew upside down." A lump formed in her throat, tears blurring her vision as Jason continued. "You taught me that happiness isn't about money or status," Jason continued, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about being with someone who makes everything worthwhile. And you, Jessica, you make everything worthwhile." His hands trembled slightly as he held the small velvet box open, revealing a delicate, shimmering diamond ring that caught the soft glow of the cafe lights. "I can't imagine my life without you," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want to build every day by your side, share every laugh, every dream, and every quiet moment in between. You are my home." A hushed silence filled the cafe as everyone around them held their breath. "Jessica," he whispered, "will you marry me?" Jessica felt her heart swell, so full it might burst. The tears were already falling, and she didn't even try to stop them. "Yes," she breathed, her voice breaking with happiness. 1,000 times yes. A brilliant smile spread across Jason's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The cafe erupted into applause, the remaining customers clapping, some even wiping away their own tears. A few of the staff members peeked from the kitchen, smiling at the scene unfolding before them. Jessica let out a joyful laugh, cupping Jason's face in her hands. "I love you," she whispered. His gaze softened. "I love you more." And then he kissed her. A kiss filled with promises, with the weight of everything they had been through and everything that lay ahead. A kiss that said this was just the beginning. A few months later, under a golden late afternoon sky, Jessica stood at the entrance of a white flower-lined aisle, the sea breeze gently lifting the hem of her flowing dress. The rhythmic sound of the waves blended seamlessly with the soft melody playing in the background, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. All eyes were on her, but she only saw one, Jason. He stood at the altar, waiting, his expression unreadable except for the undeniable love shining in his eyes. Jessica had never been more certain of anything in her life. With each step toward him, her heart pounded, not with nerves, but with the overwhelming realization that this was it. This was forever. When she finally reached him, Jason took her hands in his touch warm, grounding. The officiant began the ceremony, but for them, the world had faded away. And when it was time for the vows, Jason took a steady breath, looking at her as if she was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. "Jessica," he began, his voice filled with sincerity, "from the moment I met you, I realized my life was incomplete without you. I thought I had everything, but I didn't know what true happiness was until you walked into my life." Jessica smiled through her tears, her heart overflowing. "You showed me that real wealth isn't in material things, but in the simple moments. The laughter over morning coffee, the quiet support in difficult times, the certainty of knowing someone will always be there. Real wealth is in love, in partnership, in the desire to build something together. And that's exactly what I want for the rest of my life, with you." Jason's fingers tightened around hers, his gaze locked onto hers with unspoken emotion. "Jason," she continued, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she felt, "you made me believe that dreams aren't just distant hopes. There's something we can reach, something we can build with our own hands. You didn't just believe in me, you stood beside me, step by step, and helped me create a future I never thought was possible." She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she wiped away a tear. "I promise to stand by your side through every challenge, every victory, and every small, quiet moment in between. Because a life with you is the only life I want." Jason swallowed hard, his smile filled with so much love it nearly broke her. He blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears threatening to spill over. The officiant gave them both a warm smile before saying the words they had been waiting for. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Jason didn't wait another second. He reached for Jessica, cupping her face gently before pressing his lips to hers. A wave of applause and cheers erupted around them, mixing with the sound of the ocean and the soft music playing in the background. Jessica melted into the kiss, feeling the warmth of his love wrap around her like the breeze that carried the scent of salt and flowers through the air. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling in the golden light of the setting sun, and in that moment, as the world around them faded into nothing but the rhythm of their hearts beating in perfect sync, Jessica and Jason knew, without a doubt, that they were exactly where they were meant to be. At the end of the day, happiness isn't about where you come from or how much you have, it's about who you choose to build your future with. Jessica and Jason took a leap of faith, followed their dreams, and found something even greater, a love that turned a simple bakery and hotel into a home. Life will always throw challenges our way, but when we have the right person by our side, every struggle is worth it. Now, I want to hear from you. What's one dream you'd love to chase, no matter how crazy it sounds? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. See you in the next one.